is a month that we use to connect to the remembrance of the dead, our deceased loved ones. And on one hand, it's understandable. We feel their absence. On the other hand, it's interesting noting that the month starts with the feast, the solemnity of All Saints. And then, in the successive Sundays like today, the readings actually speak about life, not death. And I think that tells us a lot about what we are listening today to the readings. How, from the human point of view, really our sight is mostly downwards. And what the Word of God invites us to do is to raise our eyes, to see really what is our destiny. If you would like to summarize the message of the readings today in a kind of marketing saying, we could say this: worrying about surviving, invited to live, because that is what the gospel especially is all about. In the gospel, we have these curious characters, the Sadducees, that appear very, very little in the gospel, but that we know from other sources. And they are introduced by Luke in this way: those who deny that there is a resurrection. And this is interesting because very often we think that Judaism was a very compact block in the time of Jesus, that everyone believed the same. And we can see that that was not the case. And that the fact of the resurrection was something that was not universally accepted among Jews in Judaism. These Sadducees only accepted the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And in those books there is no mention of resurrection. That tells us already that how God, with his people, went little by little opening to them the realities, the truth that we arrive to know completely in Jesus, and how he led them according to their capabilities to understand things. So at the beginning, there was no mention of resurrection or the kind of life after that resurrection. And these people, the Sadducees, did not accept anything outside of the books of the Pentateuch. On the other hand, they were also very practical. They were politically inclined to support the power of the time. They were practical people. Very, we could say the earth to earth. So these characters come to Jesus and, using a text from the Pentateuch, the book of Leviticus and also Genesis, conflated in one question, propose to Jesus a question that arrives to the ridicule. The example of 7 brothers that died without having children. Why is this a problem? Well, in the Old Testament, the Pentateuch especially, there was this idea, this custom based on the idea, there is no life after this, or there is not a life worth of living after this. So the way in which a person survives is through his descendants. So if a man dies without descendants, it was the duty of his brother to give him descendants through his wife. It's a kind of weird custom for us because we are in a different time and culture, but that was the way of thinking. When you don't have a future, you try to make a future for yourself here. So they pose the question: what happens to this hypothetical woman who was married to 7 brothers in the afterlife. They were trying to put Jesus in a corner. Basically, they are trying, this idea of the resurrection is a complete ridicule because makes no sense, right? That is why they think that is what they are trying to tell Jesus. Now, what is amazing is how Jesus answered them. He tells them, Jesus said to them, the children of this age marry and remarry, but those who are deemed worthy to attain to the coming age and to the resurrection of the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. They can no longer die, for they are like angels, and they are the children of God, because they are the ones who will rise. So, basically, Jesus is telling them, you know what? You are wrong. From the point of departure, you are thinking from inside of this world. You are thinking with a mind that is anchored in this world. And you need to start thinking in a different way. There are two different realities. He says, the children of this age, meaning those that are anchored to this world and don't know anything else, who are unable to go outside of that. And those, marry and remarry. But those who are deemed worthy to attain to the coming age. So there is another reality that is not the one in which we are now. And there are some that will be deemed worthy to attain that coming age. So those people think differently, see things differently, and are able to understand that the logic of this world alone is not the one who gives the answer. This is the first time that Jesus speaks about the resurrection in the gospel here. And he invites us to open our minds and to realize one thing. Even now, among us, there are people that in theory maybe believe in the resurrection. But maybe if we dig a little bit, we find ourselves like the Pharisees, or better, like the Sadducees. We believe not really in what Jesus brings us, but in a kind of surviving in this life, making for ourselves a name, a future, a meaning, trying to find the reasons for our life here in this world. And I think that there is a temptation for every one of us of doing that, always, as there was for those Jews in those times. And Jesus is inviting us to think differently, to realize that the resurrection, the life he is bringing us, is not only the continuation of what we have here. That is why sometimes we really don't strive, look forward, live for that future life. Because we imagine it like a continuation of what we have here. And with all the things that are going on here, we are not really so attracted to it. But he is inviting to think differently, to change our ways of looking at life. And the first side of what it is, the new life, this new life that he offers us, is through his resurrection. That is not only continuing this life or repeating what we are doing here, it's completely different. Something that really fills our deepest and innermost desires. But that can only be really understood in prayer, in contemplation, as a grace of God, not only as a reasoning, human reasoning. And the gospel tells us basically that those who think only from inside of this world, really find that life and faith looked in that way is completely ridiculous. That is what the Sadducees are right to say. It is ridiculous thinking. Yes, it is. If what we think is only the same but endless, yeah, makes no sense. Let us, better take the opportunity now, make the best of this life, and that's it. Jesus is inviting us to raise our eyes and start thinking differently. Again, this only can be grasped in prayer and in contemplation, because it's not something that comes spontaneously. I told you that the Jewish culture and religion did not grasp this immediately. It took time. It took time. That is why in the first reading we have a story that was written centuries after the Pentateuch. And in the time of a great persecution, we are around the 2nd century BC. The Jews are persecuted because of their religious beliefs. They are killed. And so, in front of this, and in front of the Word of God that they knew, they understood that there has to be something different, because a lot of innocent people were dead. It makes no sense if we have a God that is almighty, all-loving, good, for those people just be dead. And this conviction that there was something else, better, not only prolonged of this life, but much better, appears already in the 2nd book of the Maccabees that we have listened to. The story of this mother who sees her 7 children died in the same day, and all of them because they want to be faithful to God. And she encouraged every one of them to be faithful, hoping in that resurrection, in that never-ending and better life in which they believe. That tells us again how this believing, really not only thinking in, but believing deeply and living, this belief in the resurrection is something that comes as a gift of God. It's not something that comes out spontaneously from us. It is a gift, first of all. And secondly, it is not only something that we accept here in our brains, but when it is true and real, it affects the way in which we live and we die. You see, when Jesus says, the children, those who are deemed worthy to attain to the coming age and to the resurrection of the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. This phrase is a way of saying they live differently. Even if they do the same things, they live them in a different way, even in this world. Notice that he uses the present tense. He's not saying they will not be married. They marry nor are given in marriage. They live in a different way. So if we really believe in this resurrection, in this new life, it is not only that our future will change when will we die after death. It is that right now, our life, our way of thinking, our way of confronting suffering, persecution, difficulties, everything will change, because we will be already living that life. And now the question that I think the gospel and the readings address to us today is, how are you living the resurrection already in your lives? Do you live a life of a resurrected people, of a resurrected person, or not? Are you still thinking only earth to earth? What are you doing about that? I think also that we need to ask the Lord, and I think also That is why we come every week here, because the everyday life really draws us to just consider what we see. And this moment of the week takes us and makes us raise our eyes to look further, to look deeper. And it's important, we need that. And ask the Lord also, Lord, that I never forget this, that I always, in everything, I can see what you are bringing to my life. And that is why we do Eucharist, give thanks, because the Lord not always will bring us a new life in the future. He is already giving it to us today, here in the Eucharist, so that we can spread it around in the rest of the week. So let us ask God to give us again this gift and for us to welcome it and to bring it to fruition.